Hi. So I would like to welcome one of my most favourite colleagues ever, Brent Cunningham, who I have had the pleasure of knowing for, well, probably 5 or 6 years now. Brent and I have worked with each other at the University of Queensland. I would say without a doubt that Brent is probably one of the smartest, kindest human beings I have had the pleasure of not just knowing, but also working with. He is always very generous with his time. He's really great with his explanations. Loves his work, is a fantastic lecturer. Some of the students at UQ are getting the absolute privilege of Brent teaching exercise physiology at the moment. I am very, very sure that the feedback is going to be exceptional. But Brent is currently finishing, just about to finish. We're talking, what, 3 weeks now?
3 weeks, yeah.
3 weeks. Brent is hitting submit on his thesis. So a small part of me is very jealous. But he has been investigating exercise and, well, I'm not even going to, I'm going to stop right there and I'm going to let you tell everyone what it is that you are doing.
Thanks, Naomi. So kind. Yeah, so I'm Brent. I'm an exercise physiologist and I have been for this is my 13th year. And then predominantly the last sort of 7 years have been in exercise and cancer. So clinically working with people with cancer, predominantly a form of blood cancer that I'll probably talk a little bit more about. Um, and yeah, largely sort of my research focus has been in cancer more broadly and that particular cancer. So that's kind of my bag. Other than that, yeah, I just am really fortunate to sort of do this sort of translational clinical research. And yeah, it's really sort of my passion area, and I enjoy it.
Wonderful. So what's your thesis on, Brent?
Yeah, so I'm looking at understanding how we might adjust exercise variables day to day based on people with cancer coming to exercise but having these fluctuations in their symptoms or side effects. And so that's really common, just generally being a human, right? We, have our ups and downs, but cancer, I guess, layers some other complexities there. And I was really challenged by this about 2019, working with some people with multiple myeloma, and they would have these huge degree of fluctuation session to session, and there was really no evidence to inform exactly like what we do, how we adjust it, rather than saying, "Oh, we'll take it a bit easy today." So that led to me sort of diving into the topic that I've been exploring as part of my PhD, which is going to be very nice to submit. So it's been a journey, as you can imagine.
Yes, yes. I don't think you should ever ask anyone at this point of their PhD journey whether they should do a PhD because you probably find that we're all a little bit battle weary.
Battle weary is a great way to describe it. Otherwise, I would have said nihilistic, but no, I actually really enjoyed the journey. It definitely towards the end, I guess, it's trying for sure.
Is very trying,
Yeah.
but it's super exciting. I mean, do you want to walk us through a little bit of what you found? So you're basically saying that people with multiple myeloma, if you could tell us a little bit about multiple myeloma as
Yeah.
well. I
Yeah.
sort of know what it is, but I'm sure we would love to hear a little bit more about that. But what you're saying is they come in to do exercise and there's these fluctuations in symptoms, fatigue, things like brain fog, those sorts of things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like chemo brain is like a real phenomenon. Yeah, that and you'll often hear it referred to as that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I guess so like looking generally sort of at sort of what my thesis has done is there's a concept within sort of exercise science and strength and conditioning called autoregulation, and that's largely where you would teach someone to just regulate their exercise on a given day based on how they feel. And there's a number of different ways that you can do that. Generally, it's useful to think about subjectively how you're feeling and then use tools that guide that. So
Yep.
your effort level out of 10, so to speak, or how far away from failure you think you are when you're doing some resistance training.
Yep.
So I tried to understand what's been done in the cancer space, and nothing had really been done, although it's advocated for, which is a bit of an interesting thing. So I was really trying to understand sort of the landscape of that within cancer and more broadly how exercise is individualized. Then from that, I have sort of developed a tool to measure readiness to train. So trying to capture and measure how ready someone feels prior to an exercise session. And then subsequently was able to sort of validate that tool. So to work out that it actually measures what it's trying to measure. And then we implemented that in a auto-regulated versus standardized exercise intervention with people with multiple myeloma. And then largely I've done sort of like an international consensus study looking to have people experience in exercise oncology sort of collaborate on how they think auto-regulation should be used, how they're currently using it, what their attitudes and sort of knowledge is, and largely try to draw on that consensus to inform some recommendations that I can bring together with what I've found. I guess there's a coalescence of that information to hopefully
Yeah.
just contribute to the literature and inform maybe updates in the recommendations we're giving for people with cancer, specifically around how we adjust exercise based on these fluctuations, but also more broadly, sort of being able to help clinicians sort of better understand how to navigate that space. So a lot of this is unpublished at the moment, and so in the future we'll be rolling it out. But it's like when you do this, Naomi, you're really just sort of very much like dipping your toe in the water. It
Mm.
can go so many different ways and so many different layers. So it's definitely nice to feel like there's some momentum now. But
Yeah.
that's largely like what my research interest is in. And then as an extension of that, yeah, very sort of interested in like the prehabilitation side of cancer and a lot of sort of the aging associations too, and sort of the implications of that interaction.
Yeah.
So that's yes.
And what did you find in like what sort of things were you looking at in terms of like this readiness to exercise? Did
Mm.
you find that when people came in, and this may not have been something that you looked at, so feel free to stop me. But if people came in and they didn't feel ready to exercise, were they then able to still exercise? Did they have a good session or did they not exercise? How did you find, I guess, the results of this readiness to exercise in relation to then exercise success or exercise intensity? What were you looking at there?
Yeah, so they all still exercise despite like how ready they were feeling. They were there. I had them in my grasp. They weren't going anywhere.
Oh.
Um, so largely, I think, which was sort of consistent with like what we hypothesized, is we do see a lot of variation between people and between exercise sessions. So there are days where people would, for lack of a better way to describe it, feel more ready, and days when they wouldn't. And there are a few, I guess, components of that readiness. So I was asking a lot about mood state and then energy levels and stress. So some of these perceptions of how they're feeling, as well as sort of sleep quality and body soreness. So some more sort of physical aspects there. And together that would give me sort of an overall readiness score, which in a way is quite crude, but it's really about sort of understanding how this works. And then with that, the trial where I was looking to see, if we do adjust exercise in one group based on these scores, that actually was, yeah, quite interesting in sort of seeing on the days when people were, feeling more ready, they did do a lot more, say, volume. So the overall exercise dose was higher. And also they did exercise much closer to failure with their resistance
Mhm.
training.
Yeah.
And I should say what they were doing with me was just predominantly lifting weights. However, I that was the design of the study. So it meant that I guess it was working in the sense that what I was trying to manipulate, was being able to be, I guess, manipulated and achieved. But that was compared with a group that just had a little bit more latitude in how they went about meeting their exercise dose. So I thought that was quite fascinating that given they had the option to sort of do a bit more on days when or less, they just didn't seem to do that. So yeah, which I think plays into a little bit of sort of the supervision component of exercise and what we
Yeah.
know about that being like quite positive, I think, at least
Mm.
in the early stages of getting people going and I guess building confidence and education. So there's definitely a confounder when it comes to that. And that's all sort of part of like the overall discussion of what I've been doing. So yeah, largely it did seem to highlight that there's a degree of fluctuation within people within across sessions and between people. And then also, yeah, it does seem to sort of lend itself to the way I think about it is sort of accommodating those fluctuations. So it's like riding a wave, right? So, when think people are ready, you're able to sort of go with that and give them more, and then you're able to sort of relatively reduce that on days where they're not feeling it. And I think long term, the idea is that people will, accrue an overall exercise dose that is, if not the same, greater.
Yeah.
But it keeps them engaged with exercise, and sort of that sort of regular engagement is very, very important, as we'll probably chat about a little bit more. But yeah.
So multiple myeloma, can you tell us what that
Yes.
is, and like how common it is?
Yeah, so it's multiple myeloma is translates to many marrow tumors, so like multiple marrow tumors, and it is what we would colloquially call a blood cancer. So there are, I guess, two types of cancers broadly. You've got blood cancers, which occur in the blood and affect sort of some of the progenitor cells in the immune system. And then you have sort of more of our solid organ cancers, which are probably more broadly what we think about when we think about like breast or prostate or colorectal cancers. And so that's where you've got like a physical tumor, and then the blood cancer is more like a liquid tumor. So the multiple myeloma basically is sort of a cancer of the plasma cells that are produced in the bone marrow.
Yeah.
And then this affects sort of the immune system because it's affecting the production of those cells. However, one of the complications of it is that as those like plasma cells proliferate and grow into a tumor, it encroaches in like the bone space, and then ultimately like leads to lesions or these holes in the bone that we would call sort of osteolytic lesions, which affects a lot of sort of your skeleton's integrity and like the strength of your bones in those areas.
Yeah.
The other complication is it's like an incurable cancer. So it's considered a like a rare cancer in Australia,
Hmm.
but we do seem to have the highest sort of prevalence out in the world of multiple myeloma in Australia, which is quite interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's
Are,
largely
sorry, are
what's
there any
that.
thoughts about why we have such a high prevalence?
Oh, it's not really known. There's a whole lot you could get into the weeds about. But yeah, it's not really known. But I think there are, I guess, some sort of like genetic components there as well. There's a lot of discussion around some of the environmental factors, and so they do know exposure to radiation and some solvents, as well as there are a few other, I guess, like common lifestyle factors that people might, alcohol and smoking are always going to be
Mm.
contributors to the potential cancer. But again, that might be the sort of facilitating a genetic predisposition as well. I guess the interesting and like crucial thing about multiple myeloma is when you sort of survey all cancer types in Australia, it does seem to sort of have the, if not the highest, the second highest sort of symptom burden and just stress levels and the lowest quality of life of all cancers. And the fact that it's also incurable
Mm.
means that people go through this treatment where the line of treatment's working well, and then as it sort of fails to work, you then transition to another line of treatment. So you're sort of going through this remission relapse sequence. But the wonderful thing is that the treatment's just getting better and better. And there are sort of some really innovative sort of immunotherapies that are happening. So the potential future is quite exciting when it comes to the treatment options available to people. But it does mean that these people with incurable cancer are like people are having much, much longer lives, which is wonderful. But there are, I guess, like the disease and the treatment related complications of that can maybe affect the quality of life or your function. So that's largely where the exercise sort of can play an important role in the lives of those people.
So that actually leads really beautifully into my first question.
Yeah.
Well done, Brent. That was very, very good. Love it.
You're
Um,
welcome.
so, the standard advice once upon a time was basically
Mm.
you've got cancer, you're going through treatment, you need to rest and take it easy. I don't know a lot about this, but I imagine once upon a time the exercise recommendations would have been very, very different to what they are now. So I would love you to talk us through like what has changed. Why do we now see exercise, particularly throughout chemotherapy treatments, is
Yeah.
being encouraged? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it probably, I think the reason it was probably not recommended for a long time is we just didn't have the understanding that we do now. So the first sort of exercise oncology study that I'm aware of was in 1989, and they were looking at doing like high intensity training with women with breast cancer.
Yeah, right.
And then there's a trickle of studies that plotted along sort of through the 90s, and then around like the 2010s, there's been an explosion. You can actually, you can map sort of this PubMed indexing of these articles. And so with that, I guess has become a lot more understanding around the effects that exercise can have on people with cancer, as well as various different cancers in various different ways. And as that evidence is, I guess, snowballed, it's garnered probably a lot more confidence in oncologists and sort of the medical teams recommending exercise and understanding it as having, important part in people's recovery.
Yeah.
And so I think that there are considerations with that, as well as there are a number of cancers, especially sort of worldwide, that have a huge amount of evidence now that it's been called by a lot of organizations that are sort of oncology focused around the world to embed exercise as part of the standard of cancer care. So being that, you get diagnosed and then you're going to start this treatment, it would sort of include you're going to start this treatment and you're going to start this exercise program or service. So that's sort of the ultimate goal. And we see this happening in countries like Germany, where this is sort of part of their standard care. And so there's a lot of advocacy going on in Australia for that as well. And yeah, I think there's probably been some, not resistance to that, but it probably hasn't taken root so much as because we do see that exercise probably is quite powerful when it comes to managing some of the symptoms and the side effects that come along with like cancer and the treatments. However, there hasn't really been any sort of evidence showing, long term does this decrease, the risk of recurrence or increase survival, because they're going to be the sort of the big levers that the sort of medical industry would, pull on. And amazingly, last year there was a really long a study that had been running for 20 years, but followed people for quite a number of years that had had stage 2 and stage 3 colorectal cancer. And
Yeah, right.
they basically, from that study, they were able to look at these people over a long period. They were either undergoing sort of a structured exercise program and then, or more of like a behavior change physical activity program. And that demonstrated delayed like basically delayed time to recurrence of the disease and delayed
Mm.
and increased survival. So that was called the challenge trial, which is landmark. And so that's been quite exciting since. So there does probably need to be more and more of those trials, which are incredibly expensive, difficult to run. It was run in multiple countries. But those sort of things would be, I guess, what would start to, give there probably a lot more confidence to this being a prescription as well.
Mm.
But as it stands in Australia, it's quite sort of a strong country with exercise oncology research. And so it is at sort of the forefront of a lot of, I guess, I guess oncologists and knowing that there's a lot of that information in sort of the zeitgeist here, that we do see a lot more recommendations and people engaging in exercise. Yeah. Did that help answer your question?
Yeah, it did. But I just want to
Yeah.
go back to that
Mm.
point that you were talking about, that there's not a lot of research, if any. Well, I mean, aside from this challenge trial, that shows
Yeah.
increased survivorship. Like, I'm floored by that. I would have thought that that would have been something that they would have, because everyone goes on about exercise all the time. I would have thought that they would have been so interested in looking at people who exercise versus people who don't in terms of, yeah, cancer survivorship. So that's only just been looked at.
Yeah, so I think there are a number of studies that look at sort of progression-free survival. So basically, in those studies, you're going to sort of recruit people, they're going to go through the exercise intervention, and then you're going to follow them over a period of time until they die. And so then what you're trying to do, which is, really some of the way research is designed, it's just inherently morbid, but this is the way that you're able to sort of look and see
Yes.
like, oh, is there an association between the people that did this exercise
Yep.
and how long they survived for or how long for they had recurrence. And there are a number of small studies that have looked at this. This
Hmm.
challenge trial had 800 or so participants,
Yeah,
so
right.
and it followed them for quite a long period of time. And it was like a 3-year intervention that they underwent.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it was like a sort of I guess you would say it was a sort of step down supervision approach over those years,
Hmm.
which is just, yeah, amazing. So, but those sort of trials are incredible, like logistically and administratively. and from a funding perspective, just
Mm,
challenging to do. But
yeah.
I do think that I guess that the landscape might change a little bit now with the sort of seeing what's come of this and how that design, has been really valuable in giving us that information. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's really interesting because I didn't know that at
Mm.
all. So that's fascinating. But I guess that would lead us to the next question then. If exercise is not well, not saying not, but we don't know whether it's increasing your survivorship as a cancer survivor, I'd be like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I feel miserable
Yeah.
and terrible. So why do we exercise during cancer treatment? What is the benefit?
Yes, so I should say it probably we do know it decreases the risk of recurrence.
Ooh, okay,
Um,
good.
and I think this would all come back to the particular type of cancer you have too, Naomi.
Of
So I can
course.
touch on sort of like maybe the different stages and what I
Yeah.
guess the implications of those are. But why you would predominantly do cancer, we can probably think about it in like three individual buckets, if you like.
Yep.
So my colleague and wonderful friend Alex Boiter, he phrased this to me once, and it's just always stuck with me about we can think about cancer and exercise largely as like pre-diagnosis, during treatment, and then survivorship
Yeah.
or that following treatment. So I think when we think about exercise pre-diagnosis, right? So maybe you don't know you've got cancer or you haven't got cancer. Generally, what exercise does is, I guess, like improve a lot of our systems and health profile. It reduces our risk of a lot of things. We know there are strong associations with aerobic fitness and function and reduced risk of dying of any cause.
Yeah.
And then also generally having sort of as much muscle mass or building as much muscle mass as you can earlier in life and sort of as much bone is really really helpful for long-term function and maintaining that. Together, they just allow you, I guess, to keep living much more of like an active life, whatever that is, like,
Yeah.
going about your life as normally or being actively engaged in exercise. So that lowers our risk of a lot of like diseases, right? So
Yeah.
in doing that, you potentially reduce your risk of some lifestyle related factors that would put you at a high risk of developing a cancer.
Okay.
Then having, so that pre-diagnosis bucket is essentially why you would be thinking about exercising. When you maybe you've just been diagnosed, there's this sort of approach called prehabilitation that people might undertake, and generally
Mm.
these are sort of facilitated through hospital services where it might be like you've been diagnosed with cancer and we're going to do surgery or we're going to start chemo, and oftentimes these treatments can happen quite quickly,
Yeah.
but there could be a window whereby they maybe get you or recommend you start exercising as a means to try and build up your function and capacity to almost create a reserve, because surgery and treatment is going to have take a toll on you and impede that function. So we do know that prehabilitation programs generally result in better sort of like post-surgery or post-treatment outcomes because you go in fitter, you've got, I guess, like a higher ceiling to then a bit more of a reserve for you to fall before you sort of maybe went back to where you started or below where you started, so to speak. So
Mm.
you're creating a bit of a buffer.
Yeah.
Um, and then survivorship is really so after you've had your primary treatment's finished, maybe you're on maintenance treatment or no more treatment, you're in
Yeah.
remission. It's then about how exercise can help to, I guess, reduce the risk of recurrence, and continue to improve function, and then also potentially help to ameliorate or attenuate some of those side effects from the treatment,
Yeah.
yeah, or the cancer itself. So they're probably the three ways that you would think about exercise. And there's a whole lot of nuance in there, but that's largely how I would categorize like the reason it's valuable in that regard. Yeah. And then you mentioned about during treatment, so I can talk to that a little bit more if you like. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay, cool.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
can yeah, and so I think it's probably important to establish that cancer is it's a disease where there are mutations in your cells, and then as a result of going through division, the mutated cells start to replicate at an uncontrolled rate, and then you get these uncontrolled growths. And that's what a cancer cell is. And basically having this sort of uncontrolled, rapid division of cells, and that ultimately sort of like coalesces, and then they grow and they form a tumor. And so the reason that, say, chemotherapy is used is to largely administered drugs that attack rapidly dividing cells, which is why, when you have chemo, you lose things like your hair and the inside of your mouth, and those areas are affected because they're cells that turn over quite quickly.
Yeah.
So largely, in order to get chemo, if it's administered intravenously, or even orally, you really need the bloods, like the circulation, to take that chemo and deliver it to that tumor or those like sites where the cancer is. So during chemo, say let's say during treatment, the reason that you might exercise is the responses that happen within our circulatory system, essentially. So when we exercise, we increase our blood flow quite a lot. We also increase blood pressure, and they can be positive in sort of driving blood through at a greater or more turbulent rate through the body,
Mm.
which can help deliver the chemo to those areas of the body. Then there's a little bit more complexity whereby tumors themselves need to create their own little vascular networks so they can get blood supplies so they can able to be nourished by oxygen and all like I should say able to be sort of nourished by sort of like glucose and the substrates that it uses for that sort of cellular division. The the blood vessel networks that the tumors create are quite haphazard and disorganized, and so they're not necessarily very well designed. They leak, and they, I guess, don't have the sort of structural integrity you would probably see in sort of our normal, like blood vessels, arteries, so to speak. So what exercise does to our circulatory system is actually sort of improve the blood vessel integrity,
Mm.
and in doing so, it actually does this to the tumor as well, which you think, oh, that's crazy. Like you're improving the circulatory availability to that tumor. But in doing so, you also increase how well the chemo gets into the tumor because it's not sort of
Gotcha.
leaking out through like this disorganized network.
Mm.
In addition to, as I mentioned, if you're increasing blood pressure and the turbulence on the blood vessels, that shear stress also has a positive effect on maybe like affecting the tumor and some of like the tumors, like the circulating tumor cells. So largely, there's a bit of a combination of effect there why exercising during chemo can be really helpful. And that's sort of like one of the like sort of the underpinning like mechanistic reasons that it's used.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I had absolutely no idea.
Yeah, so that's like when we think about sort of the hemodynamics or the movement of blood through the body and how you might be able to use it in terms to it, like I guess advantage the treatment. The other thing that can be interesting is after you've maybe had a tumor removed or you've treated it, if you happen to have any sort of circulating tumor cells, that turbulence by virtue of increasing blood flow and blood pressure can actually kind of like potentially destroy those cells that are floating around. They've seen this in I guess you would call it like a petri dish study, or where you're able to sort of put cells in like a designed sort of external hemodynamic system and see what happens to them with that, turbulence and increased shear stress of blood
Wow.
flow. Yeah, it's quite amazing. Yeah.
That
And then the
is
other side of
super
that
interesting.
is
Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
yeah, no, the other, no, of course. The other side of it is just how it can help with, things like fatigue, and some of the side effects as well. So exercise can be somewhat positive in helping to, I guess, attenuate some of those side effects, or in some ways, for some people, it like completely ameliorates them.
Mm.
The other thing to think about is everyone experiences cancer very differently. Like I've never had it and I don't know what the experience would be like,
Yeah.
but I've worked with people that you would not know that they have cancer or are going through treatment and they don't feel like they are either, through to the other where people just don't tolerate it well.
Yeah.
Also, they basically, yeah, it affects them in such a different way, or they seem to get all of the side effects. So that it's a very, very individual, I guess, like response to that diagnosis, treatment, and like the journey for different people.
Yeah.
So some people might feel far more capable to do exercise, and I completely appreciate that it's the last thing some people want to do. But there is within that there are sort of like lots of options available to them with like
Mm.
what really is exercise, and how can they just make the most of what they're capable of doing. Yeah, so that's sort of the some of the reasons that you might use it around chemo, but it also can be helpful with radiation therapy as well in increasing sort of like oxygenation of blood to like hypoxic environments. So radiation can be supported, like radiotherapy can be supported by exercise in that way as well.
That's fascinating. I have heard that having more muscle is also
Mm.
important when it comes to chemo because it does help with the side effects. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I don't know. So yes, I think we know there's probably whether it's going to help with the chemo, I'm not entirely sure. I can look that up and send you through some info.
Sorry, that was a surprise
The
question. You didn't know I was going to ask that. You just reminded me about it.
No, that's totally fine because we do know there's an association between those that have higher levels of muscle mass and those that like tolerate treatment better and or like have greater survival
Okay.
going into treatment. The other
Yeah, the muscle
consideration there
mass.
is
Sorry.
yeah,
Sorry.
preaching to the choir, Naomi. And the other consideration too is if you go in a little bit, with a little bit more body mass, bit more of a buffer, so to speak, that can actually be advantageous. There's a phenomenon known as cachexia. I'm not sure if you've heard of
Mhm.
that, where it's
Yep.
this sort of, it's a phenomenon that's associated with like a rapid loss of body weight, and a lot of that comes from you basically losing lean mass, and
Yeah.
usually that's sort of approach through like considering things like diet and trying to like get fuel back in there, but it can quickly become sort of a exponential cascade if you're unable to intervene and exercise. But people that are experiencing cachexia like very, very challenging for them to exercise. Yeah.
And I imagine that having cachexia has not got good outcomes associated with it.
No, not generally. Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
And it doesn't affect everyone, but it does affect people, and it's a real consideration. And yeah, these are potential risk factors that are probably being identified by like oncologists or the medical team
yeah.
as they're sort of exploring that treatment approach. Yeah.
Okay. So then thinking about everything that you've just said and how beneficial exercise is, what might that look like? And now I'm very aware now we have got three buckets, and I'm not
Yeah,
expecting exercise
yeah.
recommendations for three buckets. But if you could
Yeah.
maybe talk us through what might be some recommendations for particularly within treatment, because
Yeah.
I would imagine that post treatment, the recommendations would be fairly similar to the normal exercise guidelines. Please correct me if that is incorrect.
No, they are like essentially identical.
Okay.
So that's at, 150 to 300 minutes of moderate or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous.
Yes.
And then always just two resistance training sessions, Naomi.
Just two.
Um, yeah, and that largely holds true like through treatment as well. However, there's
Okay.
probably nuance when it comes to that like that individual
Yeah.
experience. So
Get us with the
yeah,
nuance,
really,
Brent. We want the nuance.
yeah, I think it's as a clinician that like works with these people, it is so much, sure, we have this like really great evidence base and it's saying like this is the sort of like the average amount that you want a person doing because that's where we know like the greatest survival benefits or risk reduction comes from. And it's like, yeah, but they can't do that. So what do I do? And the next best thing is to get them doing something that they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
And also considering that you're working with a person and that's like a whole unique situation. Um, thinking about their exercise history, like their preferences. Also, do they have comorbidities? Oftentimes, people with cancer might have things like, living with obesity, or they could have diabetes, lung
Yeah.
disease, dementia, um, cognitive impairment. So there's a whole host of other things to consider there as well. And then with that, you basically sort of need to understand their capability and capacity. So what they can do, what they respond well to, and then that really comes through like being quite iterative in your approach and starting conservatively and sort of seeing how people are recovering and responding to it, enjoying it, so they're
Yeah.
able to stick to it. And then from there, just over time, I guess the focus would then be trying to maybe build them up to that level.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily going to be achievable for everyone. Um, there are like a whole host of other considerations too. I didn't sort of talk about, if people have had metastases to bone or those sort of things, that's where we can have other things we need to consider. Yeah. So this is always a really challenging question to answer because a lot of people go, well, what should I do? And it's like, well, this is what they reckon you should do, but like, is this really, one size does not fit all.
Yeah.
So to speak. And so I really think about it being what levers are you able to pull on and can you pull on and how strongly can you pull on those? And then over time, how can we think about progressing that in some way, provided that you are responding well to it.
Yeah. So, but
Mm,
I think the most important thing, what I'm hearing from you, is that exercise is not only safe, but it's very
mm,
beneficial. Um, and I would always advocate for seeing an exercise physiologist because
yeah.
that supervision part of it, I think, would be not just that we tend to do more and work harder when we've got the supervision, but it just is reassuring knowing that it is safe and that you are doing what you should be doing.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So we probably have more studies than we need talking about how safe and sort of feasible it is. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
there are certain cancers where, exercise might not be the best thing at that point in time as well. Um, so there's like, I don't think of it as a panacea at all. I think a lot of people can probably be a bit absolutionists, oh,
Yes.
absolute in their statements, but
Yes.
that's where I think the nuance comes in.
Mm.
But yes, like generally quite beneficial. We know that even if you don't have cancer, it's the same if you do have cancer. Generally, like more is better, and like a little bit more intense is also better. But that going from something to nothing is where you're going to see the most significant improvement. It's mind-boggling, like how little goes a long way, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I tell myself every time I don't feel like exercising, Naomi. And yes, very safe. And I think when learning more and more about some of the, I guess, more risky aspects of cancer. So people have metastases to bone. So metastases is a point where the cancer is sort of spread from its original
Mhm.
site and then it's spread and, it can spread to the bone. Which means that you'll have things like the osteolytic lesions I spoke about, where you get these holes occur in the
Yeah.
bone, or you'll have what they call osteoblastic lesions, which is like building of bones. So you get this sort of disorganized deposition of bone, which
Yeah.
can sort of inherently affect the structure as well, but there's a lot of bone pain. And so there is probably a higher risk of fracture that comes with those.
Mhm.
Um, and there was a really sort of amazing consensus project done in 2022 where they just got all experts around the world that do a lot of research in exercise and bone metastases and sort of came together and said, what do you all do? Like, what do you think? And so they largely went from this, like, just don't exercise the site of the metastases or any muscles that attach to that bone or that area
Mm.
to, people generally can tolerate this if you're working with someone that's supervised and they can sort of see how you're responding and then over time give you confidence in what movements you can do safely and how to build up safely. And then also tell you like what might be the better exercise options for you or what you should potentially be avoiding. But largely, it's wonderful that we're at sort of a point now where we can give people that confidence to exercise with bone metastases as well. Yeah.
That's super exciting because that for a long time was
Mm.
a no-go. Like that was
Yeah,
unsafe.
and
Don't do it.
yeah, and that's probably like my world, so to speak, is like really I've done a lot in that space with the myeloma population and
Yeah.
navigating that was definitely very scary for a while, but it's yeah, something I'm so much more comfortable with now and yeah, it's almost not even a discussion so much with these people now. I don't even think about putting that fear in them. It's more about I'm just trying to garner what information I can from them and to understand, what's going on. And so I've had people with multiple myeloma doing some quite heavy deadlifting and squatting and even it loading areas where they've got the lytic lesions and they've done like wonderfully and so tolerated it well. And again, there's a whole individual nuance to all of that, but
Of
it's
course.
really, yeah, really lovely to see that that's possible. Mm.
Wonderful. And it must be empowering for them. They must feel so good being able to do that too.
That's actually probably the thing that I love watching the most is just how how much of a sense of capability exercise for how largely innocuous it is as a concept gives people, like how much it gives them sort of this sense of like, oh, I can do this again. And you're just like,
Mm.
wow, like literally you're moving your body, like literally what your body does, but in a way that challenges your body to do that. And that ultimately gives you the ability to do it better. He's kind of like, what? But it's the thing that I love seeing the most. And yeah, because I'm not living their life and I don't know like the challenges that they're having, and so when they notice it has like a positive effect on that, you're just like, yes, how cool that I just tell you to do something, you do it, and then you feel better.
So good. I do love that. But it does actually bring me to a question that I think will be on a lot of people's minds, and that's
Mm.
around exercise as a preventative for cancer. Do we have any data on that?
Yeah, so a lot of that is like observational and Naomi. So it's really hard to sort of like do studies where, you might be like, you're not going to exercise and you are, and we're just going to see who gets cancer. But we can do that through people contributing to these sort of like large national databases where
Yep.
generally they might just follow people for a period of time,
Mhm.
observing them and looking at their behaviors. And so they might be able to sort of look at like, oh, this group of people did 150 minutes of exercise per week, and this group were doing 30 minutes. And then they are able to sort of look at the patterns and then, oh, that group of 30, there was a large proportion of those people that were diagnosed with cancer at some point in their life. And the other group, there was less of a proportion. You're like, oh, maybe there's an association in that dose response of how much physical activity or exercise they were doing and the diagnosis or like that prevalence of cancer
Yeah.
versus the other group. So this
Okay.
is largely how a lot of this has been determined. And so, yes, we do know there are associations with cancer risk and like reduction in terms of being physically active.
Yeah, so very much
Yeah.
like the dementia world that I live in. We just tend to we follow people, we look for these relationships, and we just tend to find that people who do more exercise tend to get lower rates of chronic disease, including
Yeah.
cancer, dementia,
Yeah.
and other things like type 2 diabetes and so on. Yeah.
It's yeah, like I think the as an exercise physiologist, Amy, the thing that is like I feel like my greatest failure is my dad never exercised, and it wasn't until he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's that he then was like, oh, I actually feel good doing this. And he would walk every day, do these big walks. And I was like, ah. And so you don't know, like, obviously, like, yeah, it kills me. But yes, again, it just comes back to these things all have a profound impact, I think, on our physiology.
Yeah.
And really trying to, I guess, have our systems and the physiological responses that have these really positive adaptations on our systems, like our organ systems, and it's just really trying to give them sort of the most benefit possible.
Mm.
Unfortunately, in modernity, we tend to do have a lot of lifestyle behaviors and habits that are
Yes.
very much the contrary of like those sort of positive things. But yeah, exercise just has these amazingly like acute and then chronic responses that are really great for our health. It's just I don't know. I think it's mind blowing,
Yes.
which is one of the reasons I love talking about this stuff and researching it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm starting to get the impression that exercise is just pretty good across the board for just about every every condition. Every time I talk to someone in their respective fields, I get this very positive message about exercise. So I'm starting to get it's the same in the
Yeah.
world of oncology.
Yeah, yeah, generally. And I think it's just all about the individual and how you're thinking about applying it to them.
Yeah,
Um, the whole individualization concept is one that I still struggle with. It's like this sort of nebulous concept to me. But I think it's about how you take what we know in the evidence and that individual's preferences plus everything else that's going on and how we think about like making what we know work for
yeah,
them.
yeah,
And oftentimes when, I'm working with people with myeloma, I'll talk about fitting the exercise to them, not fitting them to the exercise. So,
yeah.
there being inherent variability or options in your approach. Like there's sort of, yeah, I don't think there's any sort of perfect way to really approach this. But we just are able, we've got so much information out there that sort of tells us like, hey, if you're in this sort of sweet spot, we know positive things might happen. And as you might have waffled on about, Naomi, when we look at research, we're generally looking at sort of like the average sort of congregation of all people and their change. And so we do have people that sort of like sit either side of that as at two. So some people may not respond as well to exercise, and this
Yeah.
is just a crappy phenomenon. And then other people look at a weight and they grow, and you're like, what happened there? Or they look at a bike and they get fit, and you're like, what? So yes, which is why, yeah, we sort of have to work with this information we have to inform what might be the best way to proceed.
Wonderful. So we've got two questions left. I'm aware of the time. I've been holding you up for a long time, but
Oh no, not this has been great. This is what
oh,
happens when you get me talking.
well, it's fascinating. But I do also have to take kids to sport at some point. They can wait. This is much better. But I
No,
do
Naomi, exercise is good. They need to
exercise is great.
go.
I want to know, like, so when someone is dealing with a cancer diagnosis, obviously that's really heavy. And when we
Mm,
talk about cancer, I mean, there's so many different types, and like you said, there's all this individual variability. But what advice would you have for someone who is struggling with adherence? Like you were saying, these guys
yeah.
in your study are turning up and they've got these varieties of symptoms. And I imagine some of those symptoms are pretty gnarly and they feel pretty gross. So, how do you help people, or what advice do you have for people going through cancer and generally not feeling particularly great?
Yeah, it's like so, it's so yeah, I just can't even imagine. It would be to, when you do feel like you can do something, do it and totally respect that when, you're not feeling up to it, it's probably not going to be the best thing for you either, depending where you're at in
Yeah.
that process of treatment. But yeah, if you're not feeling great, it's going to be really challenging. But I think if there is the ability to just do something, whether that's literally just like getting up and moving, or it's going for a walk, that is going to be a very, very positive thing you can do for your health. So, and then as you feel like that option's more available to you, just making the most of that. Yeah.
So
I think we
basically,
really need to.
sorry, go Brent, I'll just cut you off.
Oh, I just think we really need to paint the picture of just it being more accessible. I think exercise as a label can perhaps make people think like it's got to be something, structured and big, and I need to go and do it rather than perhaps even just getting moving is going to be a really, really wonderful thing. Yeah.
So to summarize that, it would be make hay while the sun shines.
If you like making hay while the sun shines,
It's
absolutely.
one of my favorite pastimes, Brent. Isn't that one of yours?
I'm just curious how you actually make hay. And yeah,
Or is it make haste?
no.
No, make haste. Make haste while the sun shines. Did I say, yeah,
Why
make
would you not want to? Why would you want to get out of the sunshine so quickly then? Shouldn't you be making the opposite of haste? I don't know.
I'm probably going to have
I
to edit this
digress.
part out of the podcast. Otherwise, they're going to be thinking that woman's an idiot. Make haste. Make haste while the sun shines. I'm sure that's the saying. Anyway, I'm really regretting bringing up this saying now.
No, 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 it's great. But yes, you just cut after you go, so make haste while the sun shines. And I go, mm-hmm.
hmm Have to try and piece it back together. Yes. So just something you touched on then, like walking. I don't know how many people I talk to who feel like walking is not valuable. But there
Mm,
is real value. Like again, it comes, I think, from this whole idea that unless you're flogging yourself in the gym, it's not a valuable endeavor. But there is a
yeah.
lot of benefit for people of all walks of life, regardless of whether you're going through cancer treatment or not, in doing some of that low intensity stuff. So just going for a walk would be a great idea for some people.
Yeah. Was that walks of life pun intended, Naomi? If not, well played.
No, it wasn't,
Um,
but I wish it
yeah, one
was.
absolutely. And I do think I can
Uh,
also get out some other buckets if you wanted to talk about that a bit more. But
I'm here for
yeah,
buckets.
100%. So I guess what walking is just a form of movement, and it's really accessible to like most people that, have that ability.
Yeah,
Um, but we've got some really like large scale like population, studies that show like the certain amount of steps, if you use that as a proxy for walking that you do per day can have really profound effects on improving your health and reducing risk. So yeah, and yeah, walking's just good for the soul, I think, as well. But
agreed.
what I was going to
Particularly
say
if you
about
do
my
it with your
buckets.
dogs.
Yeah, well, these are sort of all things that might help with behaviors and adopting activity for
Mm.
sure.
Yes. Sorry, you were saying something about the buckets. Keep going.
Yeah, so with the buckets, you can probably think about sort of exercise being like this bucket that you intentionally, pour from when you want to have a specific adaptation. So I want to get stronger or bigger muscles. Um, I will exercise to do that. Then you might have another bucket where it's just sort of more of like the non-exercisey things that you do in your life that actually all do amount to you getting to the end of the day. And you're like, oh, wow, I did like 10,000 steps today and I didn't necessarily go for a walk.
Mm.
But just by virtue of you, being up and about, doing things, fidgeting, all of that, that all contributes, right? But I
Yep.
sometimes you might often, think about can I maximize all of the non-exercisey things bucket and as
Mm.
well as trying to do some structured exercise at times I can do it. It's
Yep.
just going to be sort of this additive effect for sure.
Wonderful. I'm going to be
Mm.
talking about buckets now for forever, and everyone's going to be wondering why I keep bringing up buckets. But it makes a lot of sense. It's such a nice visual.
Yeah, it's a really easy way to carry my knowledge around too, Naomi. So
All right, Brent, are you ready? The last
I'm
question.
ready.
Are you ready for
Yes.
this? Are you ready for this? Is
Well,
that the name of your
that,
thesis?
it is y'all ready for this. Yeah.
Y'all ready for this? Sorry, that was an inside joke, everyone. So Brent's thesis is titled Y'all Ready for This, which I love because academia can be so boring and vanilla.
Yeah.
And yeah, so having a little
It
bit
can
of
just a bit of zest, right? Like, you
zest.
know.
Yeah, have a giggle. Anyway, okay. So my last question. What is something that you know that most people don't, but you wish that they did? Now, it could be specific to your research, cancer care, or we could go wherever your brain takes us.
Mm. So yeah, if I was to go broadly, it would be that elephants have fleas, but fleas don't have elephants. But if I was going to be more specific to exercise and cancer, it would come back to that point that like a little bit does actually go a long way.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think you can miss the forest for the trees if you're
Not the
making
elephant for the fleas.
no. Oh, that was too good. But yes, that was fantastic.
You're welcome.
Uh, and that would be the one thing that I wish more people knew. Hopefully, people do know it, but I do think it's just a really sort of powerful message and, if no pun intended, a step in the right direction. So,
I liked that. It was good. Yes. No, I think it's a great message. And I really wish that, and I think you're right. I think a lot of people don't know. I think there is still this misconception that you have to do so much exercise, so much intensity, so much of this. And I think that really stops people because they think, well, I can only fit in a couple of walks per week. And they think, well, it's not valuable. So why do it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Naomi, if I can be a little bit greedy and just talk to that point just a little bit more.
Please.
Was really fortunate to be involved in a review of looking at people that had gone through an exercise study with
Hmm.
cancer, and
Yes.
then they went through the study, say for 8 to a 12-week period. And then at the end, they assessed them and they looked at changes. We did a study where we were looking at what happened at the end, and then if they did a follow-up period, so 3, 6, a year later, they followed up, even though they'd not been exercising that time, and they looked at what had you know, how had those changes that they made, like what was the status of those now? Like, had they hung around? What was it? And we saw that all the physical improvements had because these people had largely stopped exercising, or not enough of them were doing enough exercise. Perhaps we weren't measuring that. Had largely sort of like regressed back to where they started,
Hmm.
except the 6-minute walk distance, because people keep walking.
Yeah,
And
right.
so that one thing they kept doing, they maintained and that benefit. And so I think that's just testament to, being able to sort of continue to do these things is going to be, far more powerful than sort of how intense it is, the amount you do, that sort of thing. So I just thought that was a really powerful finding. And yeah, it was like, I'm not surprised to see this, but it's just reinforces that idea that, staying engaged with exercise or moving is just going to be probably the most profound lever you can pull on.
Love it. Thank you, Brent. You have been an absolute delight as always. Thank you so much for your
Thanks, Naomi.
time, your pearls of wisdom. I really appreciate you. So thank you very much.
Oh, right back at you. Thanks. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I will pause that there and
Thanks,
I
Naomi.
will.
That was so
You
much
have
fun.
been incredible. Man,
Oh, really?
I was not expecting the elephant and the fleas.
Oh, sorry.
That took me by surprise. I was like, I was ready for something profound, Brent.
Well, I hope that was profound enough.
It was something.
Um,
No,
I'm
that
glad.
was excellent. That was really, really good. There was a lot of good stuff in there, and I think people will get a lot out of that. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Naomi. Well,
Oh,
have fun rushing off to. Oh, wait, I've lost your audio.
oh, because I just hang on. Because I just
It's cutting in and out.
can you hear me now?
I
Can
can.
you
Yeah,
hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Hear me now. Okay. Yes, I was keeping an eye on my phone battery actually because my phone was about to go flat, and I was trying to
Yeah.
while you were. I'm like, is that a charger? But it's for the wrong phone. So there was a few moments where I was like, oh, am I going to lose my internet connection mid interview? But we got there.
This is no frills podcasting. I love it. It's what's the yeah, it's like I can't remember. Like underground. Oh, there's a word. Don't mind me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've got the word that you're, but I think I know what you mean. But
Mm,
it's budget, Brent. It's budget.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Budget, but like there's a word. I'll remember it and I'll message you later. But
I look
it's
forward
good.
to
This has been so much fun. Thank you.
it. No, thank you. I saw your invitation to. I had to laugh. That was so funny to the regretter. Tuesday night.
Regretta.
Yeah, Tuesday night. What? Are you lunatic? Why Tuesday
I
night?
literally submit. That's my submission day. So I was like, I'm taking it to the bar. I'm submitting, and then I'm getting lit and or having a drink or two.
All right. Well, I probably won't be able to make it because I'm pretty
That's
sure I will
okay.
be on sports duty. I have kids
Cool.
who demand to do sport 5 days a week. But if I can get out of that, I will be there for a celebratory.
Oh, and if not, I'll be floating around. I am applying for jobs, so we will see. I'm hoping one comes my way, but we will see.
Well, is that the Sunshine Coast one?
No, I actually turned that down because I want to move back closer to my family. So I've applied for one at Bond. So I'm hoping that is fruitful.
Gold Coast. Where do
Yeah.
they live?
My family are in Lismore, so at least I could live
Oh, yeah.
like Kingscliff area or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So fingers
Wow.
crossed.
When will you find out?
I don't know, actually. Applications closed today, so hopefully soon. Hopefully I get
Uh,
an interview at least, right? So we'll see.
it's such a depressing world at times, isn't it? Like nothing knocks your confidence around like academia.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
I'm like, I really don't have any guaranteed income after the 30th of June because my lecturing contract ends and my scholarship stops on the same day.
Amazing.
And I'm like, I still got to pay rent. Yeah. But this is the world. So there's always I just don't want to keep doing bits and pieces, you know? I'm sure you feel like that. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
must admit, I had a bit of a, not a meltdown exactly, but I kind of was like, what am I doing with my life? I'm like a grown child. How do I not have a stable job? I've got like 60,000 million degrees and I'm like still floating between contracts. Like, this is nuts.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way, Naomi.
I think a few of us probably feel this way too.
Yeah, I think so. Battle weary, right? That's what you said.
Very battle weary and a little bit,
Yeah.
if I'm really, really honest, I am a little bit jaded. I don't
Oh,
love academia. Yeah, there's certain things where I go,
I
mm,
yeah, yeah, I love the scientific endeavor and pursuit. It's sometimes just aspects of that environment which are challenging, and it really highlights you need to find your people in that world, right? Because
100%.
that culture and those people make it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You need the buffer against. the the bad culture. You need your own little internal good culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Need a little bubble.
Yes. Well, I'm very
Yeah.
lucky. I did live in a bubble for a very long time, and Jamie is determined to bust my bubble. She keeps coming to me with all these things, and I'm like, Jamie, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. As far as I know, I live in this beautiful world, and I don't want to
Yeah.
get all the drama. So,
You're like, I'm making haste in this bubble.
excuse me, I'm making hay. All right, I'm making
I'm
hay.
making hay in this bubble.
Oh my gosh, what on earth?
Love
That's
it.
funny.
You make hay, Naomi.
I'll make whatever I want. Nobody can tell me that I can't.
I'm not going to be a haysayer. Nay, haysayer. Yeah.
Ah, that's very punny. Well done.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for this. It was great.
No, it was excellent. Thank you, Brent. Really appreciate
You're welcome. Thanks, Naomi. I appreciate it too. See ya. Bye.